Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the deepest hole ever drilled, and what they found. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1970, Soviet scientists on the Kola Peninsula in northwestern Russia began drilling a hole straight down into the Earth. Their goal was 15 kilometers. They wanted to know what the Earth's crust was actually made of at depth, not what geologists assumed from theoretical models, but what was genuinely there. After 24 years of continuous drilling, they reached 262 meters. It remains the deepest hole ever drilled in the Earth's surface. They had to stop not because of equipment failure, but because the rock at that depth was 180 degrees Celsius, nearly twice as hot as their models had predicted. What they found in those 12 kilometers rewrote what geophysicists thought they knew about the crust beneath their feet. The rock behaved as plastic, flowing around the drill. Water appeared at 12 kilometers depth, where the pressure should have made liquid water impossible according to prevailing theory. Microscopic marine fossils appeared at 6 kilometers, in rock that should have been far too old and too buried for biological material. And an internet legend about the hole grew in parallel, that Soviet scientists had drilled into hell and recorded the screaming of the damned. That story was a hoax. Everything else they actually found was stranger. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Governments keep secrets. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented fact, confirmed by declassified archives, freedom of information disclosures, and the confessions of officials long after the events in question. The United States government ran secret programs to test psychedelic drugs on unwitting civilians, Cultra, to spy on its own citizens, COINTELPRO, and to cover up nuclear testing incidents that killed American soldiers. The British government suppressed information about UFO encounters by military personnel for decades. The Soviet Union systematically falsified scientific data to maintain ideological conformity. None of this means that every government secret involves supernatural phenomena or alien contact. The reality of classified programs is almost always more mundane. Military technology being tested covertly, intelligence operations that cannot be publicly acknowledged, or simply the bureaucratic instinct to classify first and justify later. Most UFO sightings that turn out to have official explanations were classified aircraft. Most government denials of anomalous phenomena are straightforwardly honest. The phenomena being denied are simply not real. But the documented history of government secrecy has a practical effect on investigative credibility. When officials deny knowledge of events that witnesses describe in compelling detail, that denial cannot be taken at face value without independent corroboration. The proven track record of institutional concealment means that institutional denial, however authoritative it sounds, is not the same as evidence of absence. This complicates every modern mystery that touches on official narrative. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, Let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the deepest hole ever drilled, and what they found is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Drilling at the Kola Superdeep Borehole began on May 24, 1970, on the Kola Peninsula in the Murmansk region of northwestern Russia. The project was a Soviet scientific program designed to drill deeper into the continental crust than any previous attempt and examine the actual composition of rock at depth. The hole's diameter at its deepest point is 23 centimeters, narrow enough that a person could not fit inside, and it reached its maximum depth of 262 meters in 1989. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered drilling was halted in 1992, 3 years after the maximum depth was reached, because rock temperatures at depth exceeded all predictions. Models had projected approximately 100 degrees Celsius at 12 kilometers. Actual temperatures reached 180 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the surrounding rock behaved plastically, flowing around the drill rather than fracturing cleanly, making further penetration technically impossible with available equipment. The Soviet Union's collapse in 1991 also ended the program's funding. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The borehole produced geological cores representing rock from the Precambrian era, approximately 7 billion years old at the deepest levels retrieved. These ancient rocks had never been directly examined before. Analysis of the cores revealed mineral compositions and structural properties that differed from predictions based on seismic wave analysis, which had been the primary tool for inferring deep crustal composition before direct sampling became possible. The cores remain stored at a facility in Zapolyarny, Russia. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, one of the most unexpected findings at Kola was the presence of microscopic fossils of single-celled marine organisms, plankton, at depths of approximately 6 kilometers. Rock at this depth was assumed to have been subjected to temperatures and pressures that would destroy any biological material. The fossils were encased in mineral envelopes that had preserved them at depth. The discovery revised understanding of how deep biological material could be preserved in ancient crustal rock. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of water was found at approximately 12 kilometers depth, far deeper than models had predicted water could exist in liquid form under the pressures present at that depth. Analysis of the water's isotopic composition showed it was not surface water that had percolated downward over time. Instead, isotope ratios confirmed it was primordial water. Hydrogen and oxygen squeezed out of minerals under extreme pressure over geological time. This mechanism of deep crustal water production had not been anticipated in pre-Kola geophysical models. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The Kola Superdeep Borehole was sealed in 2005, approximately 14 years after drilling stopped, following the collapse of the Soviet scientific program that had maintained it. The facility above the borehole fell into disrepair and is now abandoned. The hole itself is capped with a welded metal cover. In 2023, China announced it had drilled a borehole to 10,000 meters in its own deep drilling program, still 262 meters short of the Kola depth, as part of an ongoing international effort to understand continental crust composition by direct sampling. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the deepest hole ever drilled, and what they found. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the standard geophysical interpretation of Kola's findings holds that the anomalous temperature gradient, plastic rock behavior, deep water, and deep fossils all have natural explanations consistent with known geology. The geothermal gradient exceeded models because the models were based on insufficient data. Deep water is produced by mineral dehydration under pressure. Plastic rock behavior results from extreme temperature and pressure combined. The findings revised specific models without undermining the fundamental framework of continental crust geology. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Kola results have been used to argue that geophysicists understand far less about the Earth's interior than they claim, that seismic inference cannot substitute for direct sampling, and that the crust contains surprises at every depth tested. This position is held by proponents of more radical revisions to Earth science models. It is supported by the genuine discrepancy between pre-Kola predictions and actual findings, but mainstream geoscience has incorporated the Kola data into revised models rather than treating it as evidence against the entire framework. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the sounds of hell legend, that Soviet scientists at Kola recorded audio of screaming souls at depth, indicating they had drilled into the underworld, originated as a 1989 Finnish Christian radio program fabrication, and subsequently spread globally through fax networks and early internet. The story has been repeatedly debunked and repeatedly republished. It contains no factual component. No such recording was made. No claim to that effect appears in any Soviet scientific literature, and the acoustic physics of a 23-centimeter borehole make audio capture at depth technically impossible. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the deepest hole ever drilled, and what they found does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes geological cores retrieved from the Kola borehole, spanning from surface to approximately 12 kilometers depth, confirmed Precambrian rock dated at up to 7 billion years old at the deepest levels. The cores were analyzed by Soviet geologists and subsequently by international researchers following the end of the Cold War. Their mineral composition at depth differed from predictions derived from seismic velocity analysis, establishing that indirect seismic inference cannot fully substitute for direct sampling in characterizing crustal composition. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented isotope analysis of water recovered from approximately 12 kilometers depth, confirmed it was not meteoric water, water from precipitation that had percolated downward, but primordial water produced by the dehydration of hydrous minerals under pressure. The isotopic signature was distinct from surface origin water in ways that allowed definitive identification. This finding confirmed a mechanism for deep crustal water production that had been theoretically proposed but never directly verified before the Kola results. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the borehole's thermal measurements, recording 180 degrees Celsius at 12 kilometers against a predicted 100 degrees, are documented in Soviet scientific publications and have been independently verified by geophysicists reviewing the project data. The higher-than-expected geothermal gradient has been attributed to the specific geological character of the Baltic Shield beneath the Kola Peninsula, which has different thermal properties from the average continental crust on which predictions had been based. The result drove revisions to global geothermal models. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion: that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the deepest hole ever drilled, and what they found. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Kola Superdeep Borehole remains the deepest hole ever drilled into the Earth's surface. Its findings, anomalous temperatures, plastic rock behavior, primordial deep water, and microscopic fossils at 6 kilometers, revised continental crust models, and demonstrated the limits of seismic inference. The borehole was sealed in 2005, and the surface facility is now abandoned. China announced a 10,000-meter drilling program in 2023, still short of the Kola record. The Sounds of Hell hoax, originating in a 1989 Finnish Christian radio fabrication, has spread so widely it appears in mainstream media decades later. Core samples are stored at Zapolyarny and continue to be analyzed. The Kola project remains the deepest direct look humanity has taken at what lies beneath our feet. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the deepest hole ever drilled, and what they found from the historical record. Through physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Kola Superdeep Borehole ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.